Hi, welcome back to the Diamond Matter channel. If you're new to me, thank you very much for clicking on this video. I'm Chris Bilton. I was a professional jeweller in the UK for over 20 years, but now I'm out here in Japan, not working as a jeweller anymore, but I am making jewellery making instructional videos and putting them on YouTube. So welcome. I hope you find the videos useful. Why not check out the others? I'm sure there's something on there of interest if you're looking to learn to make jewellery. Today, as promised a while ago, I'm gonna do instructional guides for different shaped stones, and there's loads of different design collets for every shaped stone, so I'll start going through a few. So let's do the easy versions of all the shaped stones first, and then we can start doing more complicated ones as time goes on. So this one, we're going to do a basic collet for a Marquise shaped stone. Now check this out. Because I said I was going to make collets for all different shaped stones, I bought this online. There's a selection of like rounds. I've got a couple of rounds, one's brilliant cut, one's something else. One's oval, it's not very oval. We've got pear shape, just weird cuts, like Asher cut. I don't know what that is, never seen that before. Cushion cut, really weird faceted on there, but I do quite like them. Trilliant, got wacky stars there. What's that, heart shape? Anyway, so I'll be doing stuff with these in the future. Marquise shaped stone. So this one came out of that pack. It's not overly big. It's not tiny as well. These are huge. Did you remember my previous video, or if you haven't seen it, a previous video I did recently? I made this, just kind of experimenting. These are massive. If you're working in diamonds, it's unusual to get a Marquise shaped stone that big. That's quite exotic. So because of that reason, I wanted to do the video with this one, slightly smaller, slightly more sensible, more likely what you're going to get given from the customers if you're working as a jeweller. So yeah, I'm going to make a collet for this. Alright, so Marquise stones. I quite like them. I haven't had that much experience with them. They're not that common, I think, to go for. For single stones, I have seen them before, but not often. Just have one by itself going on a ring. It's not bad design, is it? More likely to be a bit of decoration to sort of set off a nice big cocktail ring or something like that, a big stone in it. This was a collet from that how to make a ring from Pinterest I made. I actually got that collet cast, and it's in platinum, still not finished. So that's a ring I'm working on at the moment. But yeah, say imagine a big colourful stone in there. You've got a Marquise that way, that'd be really nice on the shoulders there. It's quite a nice shape for making something very fancy. Yeah, maybe even just one sat on a shoulder going up to the top would be quite cool on that sort of ring. But yeah, that itself is a big stone really for a Marquise. You're unlikely to see one bigger than that. So I can imagine where I used to work. Like say I was given that and had to make a pendant or something out of it, so it's just that stone, so I'm just making one collet for that one stone. I can imagine I would get a chunk of metal, mill it out flat, maybe down to 1.2. Hang on, let me see what 1.2 looks like. 1.2, 1.3, something like that. I don't know. Yeah, basically mill it down, squash it down until I've got the width I need, where I'm holding that stone upside down and put it on top of that metal. If it's just same width, really, would be quite nice. And obviously you've got the length to go right across the stone. And then I could use that, and I would drill a hole in it and plonk it on. So anyway, right, let's just do that. It's quite a quick way to make one. Okay, next day. I can't remember exactly what I was saying yesterday, but I've got this bit of metal and my stone. That bit of metal looks like I can mill it down flat, so I should get enough width and enough depth to have a good little starting bit of metal to get this collet started. Today, good example. I just snipped off kind of what I need, not just flattening a big long strip of it. So good practice. Only when you're shaping metal, just squashing it up and milling it and stuff, try to only work with what you're going to need. I need to clean these rollers, they're getting quite bad. Japan's quite steamy and humid, so all my tools go rusty way more than they ever did in England. squash it a bit longer, and then I'll anneal it, and then I'll put the width on it by changing it and going through sideways. Obviously, have your stone handy so you can check your metal. Don't just mill it out kind of blindly. You want to keep checking it, making sure you're not going too thin or just being... If you go too long, you're wasting opportunity to make it wider, because to go wider, you're still squashing it flatter as well. So you need to think ahead all the time when you're milling out metal. Mine's okay now. I've got the length, I've got the width, the depth. I can't remember what I said yesterday. I think I guessed the depth. I said 1.2, 1.3. I've got 1.25, so that's worked out quite well. These marquee shaped stones, in my experience, they're not ever very deep. That you don't need to go mad with the depth of metal that they sit in. So anyway, from working with the metal closely and the stone together, you can see what you need as you proceed with it. So regular viewers to the channel would have heard me say this lots of times before. I don't like, it's just one of my preferences, I don't like using a center punch or some kind of spike, some sharp tool to bang a dot in it for being a guide for drilling. I think it's much more gentle, less risky way to proceed. Just with a small ball phrase. There you go, that's my guide for the drill. There's just no pressure, no risk of slipping and grinding a big line on something. I just prefer using a small ball burr, but up to you. I'm just going to sharpen this drill. Watch how quick this is. It's big enough I don't really need magnification. I touch it on, I tilt it sideways slightly. There you go. Carefully rotate it 80 degrees. I will check it with my loop though to make sure I've sharpened it to the center. I've done a better job, but I think it's going to work alright. No edits, yeah? I'll show you how sharp this drill is. If I can hold on to this metal nicely. There you go. Sharp as F. Very quick job. Once you get good at it, you got a bit of practice, very fast with these paper discs. It's alright, what I do is I just kind of have a double check, put in my stone over the bit of metal, so I've got an idea exactly how far I'm going to cut either side of that hole. It's probably a good idea to use a pen or just scratch, maybe a line, just give yourself a guide. Not going right to the outside of the stone, but you have to go quite big, because like I say, they're cut quite shallow, so you need to cut, I mean the angles on the side are quite shallow, yeah, so you need to cut quite a long hole, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I'll talk about what's happening as I do it. Yeah, to get the stone to sit down, you have to cut quite a long hole. That's what I'm remembering. So let's just do it and see what happens. So these pliers have got small teeth on. I don't think any jeweller is going to recommend that, because working with precious metal, any pliers with teeth on is going to mark what you're holding. But I've found these so useful so many times. I'm probably going to be the only jeweller that says have some on your bench. So I'm going out a bit. I've got a bit of an angle on there, and then I'm just sort of aiming to finish at the end of my little straight saw cut. This is just like a very quick starting off little shape. And then I'll put the stone on and then see how much I need to adjust it. So I've opened it up, I've neatened it up as well, it's a much nicer shape now. Try it again. I still think it's going to need to go wider and longer, but I've made such a big difference to it, I want to try it again. Yeah, just needs to go a lot wider and then it'll sit. I don't think I've got to go too much longer, but definitely need to go wider and then it'll sit down much nicer into that hole. So this is how I proceed. Just cut a bit, check it, cut a bit, check it. And you're looking at the gaps, seeing where the stone's touching, and then you know where the stone is touching, but then there's a gap the other side, you know where to cut out, and then you can imagine the stone dropping down and fitting the hole nicer. So that stone is sitting in there nicely, and I know that because when I look around the bottom of it, looking at the gaps with my 10 times loop, there are no gaps. It's just sitting in there nicely in that shape. And also another thing is it doesn't slide about, it doesn't slide backwards and forwards, left and right. So that's a good shape, but the stone is still too high. So I'm just gonna open it up evenly all the way around, and then the stone will sit lower, but also shouldn't slide around because the shape of that hole is nice. And I haven't even begun to look at the back hole yet, so that's still a rough, horrible looking thing. But let's just get the stone sitting at the right height, nice and securely first, and then worry about tidying up the back hole. You can see the hole is not looking very neat. I might tidy it up a bit. But it's a bigger version of what it was. And that stone now sits much lower, and then without even looking at it closely, it doesn't slide about. So 10 times loop. I'm going to put it to the camera same as I would to my face. Bring this closer. Can you see where the stone is touching the metal? That's where I'm looking. And there's no gaps there. Looking around it. It's a bit difficult to show you, but basically I'll rotate it, I'll look around the stone. So now I would like to neaten up the back hole a little bit. And looking at it, I'm wishing at the start I had, like once you've milled out your metal, it would be a good idea to get one side perfectly straight and then use your dividers to draw a line down the middle. And that middle line will be a really good guide for making sure you cut a hole and you get the end points going perfectly in line. Then also it'll act as a guide for symmetry, so you're cutting out the same amount both sides. So that'll be a good guide for making a nice hole to begin with, which I didn't do obviously, so I've just been sort of freestyling it. Yeah, almost looking at the back, I sort of wish I had a line going straight across it, which it's not too late, I guess. But yeah, to start off with, might be an idea to do that first. It'll help you out. Is it clear? I'm just kind of winging it with these videos. This is why I don't want to do very formal online courses, because I'll have to, like, at the start of the video, explain all the tools I'm going to use first, all the techniques we're going to be doing, and then have it all nicely laid out in steps. It's not my style to be that formal. I just kind of talk about what I'm doing as I'm doing it. And unfortunately, I'm a little bit out of practice, stuff like this, making these sort of specialist shaped collets. So there's things that come back to mind as I'm doing them. So I may come across less professional than I am, or used to be. If you're saw piercing, if you're not that confident with it, it's no harm. Once the hole's big enough to get a little, if you've got a small needle file, I don't suppose there's any harm really in trying to neaten it up with a needle file. I've opened up the hole, it's a bit neater. I didn't go mad with it because I still need to cut it out, yeah. So just double checking my stone on the top, just having a look at how much over the edge of that hole my stone sits, just so I kind of know. Yeah, the edge of my stone goes almost to the edge of my metal. Not quite, it's probably about 1 mil around my hole. Remember, when it's finished, we don't want to, with the stone on there, you don't want to see any metal around the stone looking down on it when it's a finished collet. So I've set my dividers at about 1 mil, and I'm going to carefully draw around it, get that guide edge. Now the edge of my top of my hole isn't perfect, so this is just a guide. So I'm not using my teethy pliers anymore on my parallels. So I'm worried about the teeth sort of catching the edge and causing a little bit of a problem. So now with my guide, start cutting this out. I'll just cut that off. Sorry, you can't see any of that, can you? See me break that saw blade then? Like, it was literally the exact moment I took my eye off what I was doing to check the camera screen to make sure you could see what I was doing. And it just broke, like immediately. Always got to keep your eye on what you're doing. Also, if you're watching what's happening while you're doing it, it's a way of sort of staying present in the moment. It stops your mind wandering off. Cut it out. I've just decided to file that a little bit because there's loads of metal for my pliers to grip onto, so it's just a little bit easier now than it will be once it's completely cut out. Just a bit of a head start, like not completely accurate and perfect. Go around it with a file, just get it kind of a little bit neater. Then we'll put the stone on it. See how we're getting on. Right, let's try the stone on that. These stones, yeah, if you've got a diamond like this, the points are quite delicate. I know diamond's hard, but they can break. So you've got to be super careful with the points of these, don't bang them about too much. Okay, I'm liking the width. I obviously need to neaten up the curve so that I'm matching the stone nicely. But the metal, I can see it over the edge of the points, so I need to go more, just shorten the points a little bit, but basically, that's working out all right. When you're shaping these up, it can be tricky to get illusions from your inner edge and the outer edge. It can sort of hide what's going on. Like you can see mine's a bit more flat on the right side, so I need to reduce it a bit there. So anyway, I know about these illusions, so I'm looking for them, so I want to point out what happens. Also, check your stone as well as tidying up the outside. You don't want the points going right over the edge. There's going to be V-claws going on the outside, so you want a little bit of stone sticking out, but it doesn't have to be loads. When you get to the stage, you need to take your time, because it is difficult to get a nice, proper, nice shape on it. You can help yourself out. What I find helps is putting my saw blade over the top, like point to point, and then seeing if the curvature is the same both sides of it. Want to have a little trick, checking the points. If you hide one half of it and then have a look at it, it can sort of help you see what the outer edge is doing. When you're happy with it, turn it over. There's going to be more work to do with your back hole. I mean, mine still needs a lot of work. Like the curvatures are not matching at all. And then once I've got the outside really nice, I will then use that as a guide. Possibly even draw with my dividers again around that edge, and then that will mark out a nice matching hole for the back. Right, been ticking around it, papered around the outside. I'm still not really 100% happy with it. I would do, if working in gold, I remember what it was like working where I worked. I'd be doing more work on that. I wouldn't even be showing my boss, asking if that's okay to move on with, because I just know for a fact he'd send me back to do more work. But for the purposes of this video, I think it's good enough to give you the idea of what needs to be done. So just neaten up your curves, try and keep things symmetrical, try and keep lines flowing nicely. This is not good enough if you're making high-end bespoke pieces, but it gives you an idea what to do to make your own. I need to be careful with the jewellery I'm making on this channel, because I do always make things to a lower level and then I just sort of write it off as it's okay, you understand what needs to be done, so that'll do, kind of level. I need to be careful because I'm practicing being a worse jeweller than I used to be, so that means I'm not improving anymore, which I'm not comfortable with. Let's stones on there. I like it. Dimensions wise, it's good. So let's make some V-claws. Now I have actually done a V-claw video in the past. It was one of my early videos, so I'll put a link on the screen to that one. That was just in depth, like I just made the V-claw. So yeah, if you want to check that out, that will be really in depth video guide on making a V-claw, basically doing that again, but I'm making two this time, much smaller than I did in that video, and we're going to be putting them onto a collet as well, so it goes a bit further than that video. Okay, so making the V-claws, you need a long, flat bit of metal, and you always need a wider bit of metal than you imagine. So here's the bit of metal I've just prepared for making the claws. There's my collet. There's the bit of metal I'm going to use to fold up the V-claws. And when you cut out the centre section, there's less left than you would imagine. So always start off with more, definitely more than you're going to need. Right, so when I first did these, I had to start again because the strip of metal I milled out wasn't wide enough. It's they always need to be wider than you would imagine. So our V-claw sort of goes on the end like that. What happens is you mill out your metal. Say that's my strip of metal. I would cut down the middle with a saw blade and then like cut a groove out with my square needle file. So you've got all this width, but you're taking out all this distance because it's folding up like that. So yeah, it's only that and that remainder. So that's the mistake. You need this extra width to end up with that and that correct. So just to draw that, what might make more sense to you. So we cut this out. See what I mean? So with your strip of metal, I think I've gone a bit over the top, perhaps with this one, just for this tiny collet, but it's I'm more comfortable working like that than just about scraping by and then proceeding and simultaneously worrying whether it's going to be alright and you're wasting your time, you have to start again because you haven't got enough metal. So get a bit of metal if you're interested. I mean, this is quite a tiny one, so I've got 0.74, I think that's loads, and that's a bit of a burr on that as well, so probably more like 1.6, so just under 1.7. I've got filed the edges parallel. Let's just find the centre. I use dividers to go up and down the centre. I don't worry too much about finding exactly the middle. All I do is just turn it around and go down both sides. You can see there's a slightly wide line. That's just two lines side by side, but it doesn't matter. I can still see where the middle is. So let's put a saw cut in that. Right, cutting that line all the way down the middle. Check this out. When you push on that, you need to cut a straight line, but when you push, your saw blade bends a little bit, even when it's really, really tight. That's no good. That means your saw is only really cutting the end, it's not cutting down the middle. So to kind of cheat a little bit, this is just a flat strip of metal, so I don't think there's any harm in doing this at all. Just put a very gentle curve on it, all the way down the middle. Now, I mean, I curved that quite a lot, but now I can push on that and my saw blade can go right across it at any point. No difficulty at all. Actually, the middle has now become the easiest part to saw. So, another thing I've done before, I've sharpened up my dividers and really scored a deep line down the middle, and that actually helps as a guide for your saw blade to fit in, for your initial cuts to really line up down the middle. So yeah, just carefully saw away. We're going to be filing it after this, so don't worry too much about neatness. If you go off a little bit wonky, it's not the end of the world. As for going through it, go down about halfway maybe, and then leave the rest for filing. You don't want to cut too far through it, because when you straighten it up and then actually bend it into a V-claw, you don't want to risk it cracking and going and just falling into two pieces. That would be bad, because then you could repair it, you could continue with it, but then you've just got a V-claw which has got solder right to the outside edge. It's a kind of like a repaired claw while it's brand new. I don't like that. Okay, took a few minutes, just went up and down it with a saw blade. Probably not even halfway, just a little bit less. Leaving it curved still helps you out when you're doing the needle filing bit. So a square one, preferably nice and sharp. Just hook it in there, file away. Try and do it evenly deep all the way across it. Yeah, needle file, been going up and down it. Curve is very useful. Trying to get a feel for how deep it's going. You get a clue on the depth by the width of the little groove you're cutting. Obviously if it goes wider, it means you'll cut down a little bit deeper. Also, I tend to use the very end just to sort of scrape along it a little bit. I think that just helps even things up. So anyway, do that, try and keep it even. I've done it again, haven't I? And I've done a massive long bit of metal and set a bad example. Anyway, forgive me this time. Yeah, only work on what you need. That's a good habit, and I'm definitely noticing I'm becoming a worse jeweller than I used to be. Right, so yeah, get it flat, because we're going to turn it up now. A couple of gentle bangs. Be careful on the ends, you don't want to put little chamfers on the ends, if it's all possible. I literally need, like, not even half of the metal I've made there. What's going on in my head? Let me just cut that off. Right. Okay, so folding this up, you can use definitely use pliers with a bit of width on the end. I would love to know where my smaller size parallel pliers are. Here they are. They just appeared. They come back when you ask for them. So yeah, what I do is I like using parallels because they open parallel and they're nice and wide as well, so it helps you out doing this sort of job. Then you just got to try and fold it up a little bit. What I'm going to do is try and get a little bit of a bend down all the way. So I'm just tweaking it, moving it along. Haven't got to use these pliers. Definitely recommended use something with a bit of width. It's just one of those things, you just do it. No one really tells you exactly what you got to do, you just get it done. So I'm going to anneal that now because that's been hammered and bent around and stuff. So I've put a bit of a curve in that, a bit of a bend, a bit of a fold. Now I'm going to anneal it and then fold it up a bit more. Okay, so I annealed it. Watch this. You can tweak it a bit more if you want with pliers, but I like doing this. Yeah, it's kind of fun. Just hold it, just pushing one side down, hold it with pliers, tweaking it up a little bit. See how it's going? So very carefully, this is what I do. I almost don't recommend this because it can snap out of position and then you end up squashing it badly. So if you can do this, do it very carefully, but just hold it in your pliers. And you can move along it, squeeze it a bit shut. But anyway, let me just explain something. That file is right angles, so it's only folded up like a little L shape. We need to go past L shape for the end of the collet. It's got to be a bit more of an angle than that. So what I do is I at least get it to a nice L shape first. Another way to take it a little bit further is hold one side of it in your parallel pliers, and then you can just look and you can see where it's gappy. I can see a little section there where it's raised up, so just hammer it down. There's only a thin little bit of silver, you haven't got to really do anything mad to it. So what I've done in the past is get to this stage and then I will, because we need it to fold up a little bit more, so I put a saw groove through it and then it can fold up a little bit more. Try and cut 3/4 of the way through it with a thin saw blade. Okay, I think we got it. So that I should be able to squeeze that closed a little bit more. There we go. Lovely. Oh, gorgeous, gorgeous, as another YouTube jeweller says all the time. Alright. Okay, let's try it out. I think I may need to do a little bit more. A little bit more, and then we're nearly there. That side looks alright, this one's a little bit more open. Okay, so yeah, basically, with your saw cut, that was just one saw cut with a thin saw blade, and it was enough to squeeze it. Just that extra little bit needed. So I'm going to try and fold it up a little bit more, but it's basically there, look. Can you see that? What I do is you can move it along, checking the gap, seeing if it's going to close up nicely. Yeah, it needs a little bit more of a squeeze, but basically, yeah, just one saw cut with a thin saw blade, and then you should be able to fold it up enough to get it just right. And then once you're happy with it, you've got it nicely closed up, nice and evenly all the way across. Just run a tiny amount of solder. You want that solder to just go, ideally, run it along there. So once you've squeezed it up and you think you've been quite accurate, put it on your metal block, and you should sit quite flatly. should sit quite flat. Might be twisted, you can twist it gently. Yeah, it's just a thin little bit of metal, so it's quite easy to manoeuvre it about and get it better. So I'm gonna solder mine up now. A little bit of solder on the end. Hopefully I can get that to run along. It might not be enough either, so I'll put a little bit on from the other end if I need to. Just warm it up slowly. Where you put the saw blade in, it should be nice and clean. See that? Not quite. Ah, there you go. Yeah, just about got that to go along the whole length. Hang on. I think my cat is climbing up someone else's building. Cookie! What are you doing up there? Oi! Right, just went to rescue my cat. I've never been inside that building before, just walked up the stairway. It's like, so depressing. Like, I think there's one person lives in that whole block, and it's just really rusty old doors, and it just looks really abandoned. It's horrible. And there's only like 2 people live in that one. I think they're just waiting for him to die off, and then they're going to demolish the buildings. That's the plan, apparently. Which we're looking forward to, because then it'll open up a whole new view, and there's a big mountain behind it, and there's going to be really nice, beautiful sunrise there from this side of the house, with those buildings gone, so we're looking forward to them being knocked down. Anyway, right, this is it's too big on there. Putting it along there, it's put it on the end, looks massive, so the ends need neatening up anyway, so I'm just gonna carefully flatten that edge and then get it to the sort of distance that looks right, then we'll file it up a bit and put it on there. Okay, so they need reducing a bit, so I'm just hanging on to one end, not worrying too much about my plier marks because I've got enough length there for both. Just carefully trying to reduce the length of it a little bit, evenly all the way along it. So I reduced it a bit, just touching it against my stone. Do I like how much it's going over it? Still a little bit long perhaps, so I'm going to reduce it a bit more and then move on. I mean, there's no real rule about the lengths of it, but as long as you've got metal going down both sides of the stone, it's fine. You could go really short and it almost looks like a little round claw on there. But I think it's nice, a V claw, if it actually looks like a V. Obviously setting it, you can be a bit clever with the setting and sort of cut angles in it to sort of exaggerate its V-ness. But anyway, I'm going to shorten mine a little bit more. So yeah, I'm leaving mine like that. Quite long, quite a significant amount going down either side of the stone. Now it looks like a chunky, horrible thing, but still a lot of work to do to it around the outside, and the sides a bit more as well. It's going to be set in there, look a bit thinner once it's set anyway. Okay, so anyway, I'm okay to move on now with this bit. I'm just going to put these on so they go in straight up. Last time I did a V-claw was I did a full diamond set, pear-shaped diamond cluster, had diamonds going all the way around the shank, cluster all the way around a big pear shape. That had a V-claw which I put on at that angle. I'm not doing that, this one's just going to have 2 going straight up. But I am going to file the claw going down to a point, to a bottom. Tell you what, don't buy these little mandrels off Amazon. They're crap. Buy cheap, buy twice. Why can I not learn this lesson? If you buy a pack of 10 or something for £1, of course they're not going to be any good. Well, they're too chunky, I can't use my stone cutter discs, grinding wheels, because that won't go through the middle hole. And they don't screw down tight. It's like that's too long to go in the hole, so I have to reduce the length of this screw so it actually screws down tight, because they're not quite enough for the paper discs. So this claw gonna be about that long. Stone is not set this side, stone is set that side, so I was tapering down towards the bottom, so there's the bezel sitting in there. I'm going to cut it off like that. So up to that point. I didn't cut right up to that corner, I basically cut off that inside edge. So I cut to the inner point, not the outer point. So that, if it sits parallel with that edge, wants to sit like that. That's a bit ugly. So we're gonna file it so that edge is going vertical and then the outer edge will be going at an angle. So not like that, that's how it wants to sit now. We're gonna file it so it sits more naturally like that. That'll look nicer. And we do that by holding it with the groove facing you with a 3-sided file, not a square. Excuse me, hello? We have a guest. Excuse me, I'm making a video actually. Yeah, you need to not be here. So yeah, 3-sided file, because the square one, do you remember after we cut the groove with the square file, we folded it up some more, so there's like a steeper angle, so the tri-square actually suits that groove really well, actually. So yeah, we're going to open it up, not parallel to that corner, so the file goes in like that, yeah. At the moment it will sit like that. We're going to file it, tilting it towards the point. You see that? You seeing that? Tilting it down that way and filing. Double check you're keeping it nice and central. Give it a lot more, put it at a nicer angle, give it a lot more finesse as well. You don't want it really chunky on the bottom of the V. It's going thinner. Nice if it goes thin in all directions. Okay, can you see the end? Can you see the end where I put the file in there? It needs a bit more work, but you can get the gist of what I'm up to. So now, because I put that angle on, it's sitting more back like that, more naturally. So it looks nicer, it's a nicer angle. Got a bit more finesse because it's thinned out now, not a big chunk on the bottom of it. And where we've put a bit of surface angles that matches that, it's going to be a stronger solder joint as well. So it's literally win, win, win. It's 3 wins there doing this move. So I've neatened that up a little bit. It's sitting on there a bit nicer, a little bit more central, and yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm happy with how that's going to solder on, so I am now going to just neaten up the outside a little bit. Just while it's easy, you've got this extra length. So just, I'm going to touch it with a file and then hit it with my paper disc a little bit. Nice if we can get it nice and sharp down the back. I'm going to file mine a bit more. So when you're making V-claws, you want to have a bit of thought for how much metal you need. Make sure you've got enough to do like all 2 or 4 or 6 or however many you need, because it has happened to me in the past. You're doing all this work and then you get to the last one, you haven't got enough, so you've got to go back to milling out metal and folding it up and doing all that again. Waste a lot of time if you haven't got enough metal. So holding the stone from the side, holding the stone in position, just double checking I've got it filed up nice and neatly for a good amount of length. Yeah, fine. So, that one's almost finished. You can always tweak them a little bit more when they're soldered on there, but that one's good for soldering now. It's reasonably accurate and everything's lining up nicely. It's going to solder on really well. So I'm going to chop this one off and then do the same again for the next one. Welcome to the new jewellery making television show, All That Glitters. It's day 3 and all Chris has done is made 2 little triangles that don't match and an eye shape. The producers are beginning to regret inviting him onto the show. Okay. Right, so I'm evening up these claws now. One's shorter than the other one's sharper and the other one's shorter, so I need to get them both the same. I'm happy to get them looking from the side. I want them going to a point, because that way I can get them both exactly the same. And then when I'm soldering them on the side of that little point will just go over the edge slightly. So it's nice if you can get the dimensions really similar as you can. Helps you out get both ends on really perfectly matching. So I've shortened them. I've been holding it carefully. These paper discs are coming in very useful because they don't push hard on a piece, but they do cut quite quickly. So very good for this kind of thing. When you're holding something quite delicate, you don't have to really clamp onto it really hard, like with pliers or anything. You can just gently hold onto it and still have ability to do a lot of cutting quite quickly. But I've got the lengths the same, but looking at it from the side, I want them to go to a point. So I am going to hold it gently with some sharp pliers and take that point off a little bit. I think making this kind of thing is good practice, not only for making this, like you sat down and made these, yeah, you didn't only learn to make these, you practiced the skill of making jewellery. So you've now got a bit more experience making fiddly little things that are difficult to hold on to, making them accurately, and then the skill you acquire will help you out next time you sit at the bench. So everything you do is like a little stepping stone of progress. So if you're learning to make this kind of thing, you're going to want to see what the teacher's doing. This is my work. Ready to move on, I think. Not super accurate, but pretty good. For something small, it's fine for putting that on. And there's also, when those claws are on there, you can still adjust them. You can still get rubber wheels down the sides and disc them back and stuff. I mean, you may make one of those, have it cast for the future when you need it. Like, you don't want the claws as wide and stuff. You can adjust things once they're soldered together. But it is quite nice if you can make it exactly how you want it and then just get it all together. It's a quicker way to work, but it's not the end of the world if you don't like the look of it or whatever happens. Okay, so I was trying to, like in my video I did recently with one side hooky tweezer trick, I was trying to hold onto the claw in position on the end, but it kept sort of moving about. It wasn't secure enough. So I've basically just underneath my charcoal blocks, nice and flat. So I just pushed it in there. Well, it's working a treat. So I could just plonk the stone on that, give you an idea what it looks like when it's set. So it's nice putting the stone on it. I can see how far I can get away with pushing the claw down. Also, pushing the claw down, I get the choice of having the wider part of the claw over the stone. If I soldered it in too high, when I cut the claw off to length for setting, I might feel like it's a bit too narrow, because obviously it's tapering down to a point at the bottom. So double check the heights of your claw compared to where the stone will sit, just so you know what's going on before you solder it. Do a little bit of soldering, the camera's about to run out of battery. So I will have lunch and then do some editing while it charges up and then finish this in the afternoon. It's always a way to proceed. Been using this torch over a year, still hate it. And the solder just went up the claw, not on the bezel. Oh, there we go. Rescued it. Okay. So try your best to get it on straight, because even with a round claw, a round bit of wire, you can. I mean, you should try your best to get, every time you put a claw on, try to get it on straight when soldering. But you can get away with a very minor tweak with a round claw. That, you can't really hold it and do anything with it. You can't twist it, it's not going to flex. Can't pull it out without damaging your nice, like, sharp corners. So you've got to try extra hard to get it on straight. And also, when you do one, definitely put the stone on, make sure you like how the stone's sitting. Can that stone be set? Is there enough metal above it? Because the second one has to mirror the first one. Has to all be nice and symmetrical. So you're using the position and angles and stuff for that first one to get the second one on correct. So if that's wrong, then the second one's going to be wrong. So definitely double check it, everything after your first solder. Also, what I did before I put that claw on, I just took the bottom half sort of corner off a little bit. Just, let's say that's flat, I just put a bit of an angle on it. It just helped that metal sit flush to the inside edge of that claw. So I'm going to do the same on this one. Like, it's very minor, but it helped. Just make it sit a bit more flush. There's hardly anything. So I just pulled mine out charcoal block, just having a look around it, making sure like how straight everything is. Because you've got to have the mindset, if you feel it's wrong, you might have to pull one off and start again, which means going back to filing off your bits of solder and stuff and carefully working on it again. But it's a much more pleasant way to work if you can just get things right first time. Otherwise it just feels like you're going backwards and it gets frustrating. So I will chuck that in the acid now. So taking that outlet acid with my 10 times loop, checking around my solder joins, making sure the solder's gone all the way around it. There's no like little bits that are not soldered. Looks good. Picking my stone up now, just stuck it to a bit of blue tack. Lowering it down on there. If it doesn't drop down, that's good, because that means the claws will have to come out a little bit and then the groove cut for the stone to click in, and then the claws can go back over the stone. So measurements are quite good. Just better to be careful with stuff. I mean, that hole's really open, so if you want to do some more work to get your back hole a bit nicer, you can still do it now. A little bit of paper wrapped around a file. Just going to touch across this flat bit on the top. I would always do this because I like to polish things out before setting. So getting all these bits that go under the stone all polished nicely is always good. Makes the stone, especially diamond, you've got to have them polished, because if there's any sort of little black stains in or anything, it's going to sort of show under the stone and make the stone look worse than it really is. Touching the curved section, but being careful not to round off any corners I want to keep sharp. So I like to make things really sharp. It ensures you're getting accurate results for measurements, angles and symmetry that you're after. And if things are too sharp, like they're going to be uncomfortable to wear, then you can round them off on purpose, like a gentle touch of paper, or even just polishing slightly heavy on the sharp bits on purpose. That will help you out. So when I'm checking this over, yeah, kind of finished, but I'm checking it over to see where I can be more accurate. That's not perfect. That little edge of that corner needs taking off. That needs sharpening up, that little point where it goes in there. Seeing how parallel this is to the outer wall to the inner wall. It goes a bit thick there, a bit thin there, a bit thick there, so that needs work. But curvature and stuff is nice. The actual size of it is nice for the stone. Dropped it for the 100th time while making this video. All my symmetry going across, looking at the side, angles alright. The stone will drop down, yeah. I mean, these claws are, I wouldn't want them to be any shorter at a finished stage like this, but the stone will drop down a little bit, and so that amount of metal, because they're tapering down to a point, as the stone goes lower, there's less of this kind of distance going over the stone, so it looks a bit over the top, but that kind of has to be like that because I made it tapering down. And so with its length, the longer they are, they'd be a little bit wider if it went up higher. So yeah, checking on my joins. Solder joins are good, and then solder joins are clean, like tidied up, rubber wheeled it, hit all the edges. I've left the tops of the claws slightly like that. I don't want to take any more off them, because if I was going to set, you're just taking more and more height off them, and I've kind of gone to sort of minimum really with the height of those. Just general look around it. I'm not too concerned with the top because that's where the stone sits. I just did that so the stone sits down at the height it needs to be, or what I wanted it to be. Just the back hole would make it look nice because people can see that after the stone set. And yeah, just generally checking over it like that. So it's finished, but it needs work. But that's enough for this video. that's a basic way of making a collet for a marquise shaped stone. Not common really in the jewellery trade. Like, I haven't used them that often, haven't made collets for them often at all really, in what I can remember. But that's a basic way of doing it if you do come across one. That piece I did in my experimental video, just mucking about, that was a very quick and rough way with round claws, maybe not advisable, not a safe thing to wear, especially on a ring that gets waved around and banged against stuff. Okay, so the origins date of the marquise cut date back to the 18th century when King Louis XV of France commissioned a jeweller to design a cut shape that resembled the lips of his mistress. Ooh, romantic. I can't even say all that. Over time, there was a lot of French there. Over time, the marquise cut developed into the distinctive shape known today. So there you go, a little bit of history on the marquise shaped diamond there. Quite funny to think that 250 years ago, a French king was getting fancy presents for his women, and now here I am in 2021, an English guy living in Japan is making videos about his gift and talking about him. So that's quite cool. I hope in 250 years later, well, it's going to be like cyborgs on Mars, isn't it? I'll be talking about me. That'll be quite an honour. I hope that happens. Right, so anyway, we've got new patrons. Where are we? Jane Jammers, Barbara Bemis, Josh Gibson, Kim Neumann, and Melanie Riddle. Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you contributing to the channel, helping me continue it, helping it grow. It's quite exciting to do more in the future. I really enjoy doing it, so I'm really very grateful to all the patrons. And you may notice there's a join button on the Diamond Mounted page now. That's the equivalent of patron is now for YouTube as well, so you can become a Diamond Mounted member. It's basically mirroring Patreon, but I couldn't give the exact same prices, just YouTube wouldn't let me. So everything, I think, is like 1p less to be a supporter member than patron. It's 1p less to be a classic member than a classic patron. But it's £1 more to be an official YouTube member. I couldn't change that. That's just how it had to be on YouTube. But it's still early days for the YouTube membership. I still need to upload all the full instructional guides. It's going to take me a few weeks, I think, to get it all sorted out. So for access to all the videos and all the benefits, Patreon is still better. So I'm going to mention the YouTube membership, but I'm not going to really push it until I've got it all set up and sorted out. But anyway, check it out if you've got time and energy. If you're new to the channel and you liked it, this was useful to you, why not click like and subscribe, or even better, become a patron yourself. Yeah, there's a link in the description for all of it, so have a look. Have a look through the other videos as well. I'm sure there's something useful to you, or interesting at least, if you're learning to make jewellery. So yeah, thank you for joining me again, and see you next time. See ya.